All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Kerri Roberts. Kerri, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for having me.
Well, I'll tell you, I am really looking forward to this. I want to start by giving a shout out to the folks at the podcast guest platforms because that's how you and I connected. And it's really cool because when I get emails from them guys recommending somebody for the show, they've been sending me emails for about 2.5 years now. And what's really cool is they have recommended some awesome guests for the podcast and stuff. And so now, whenever I get those personalized emails from them, it's kind of like Christmas time, Kerri. It's like I don't know what's going to be in there, but it's going to be good. and so, and it's just great to have a working kind of relationship with somebody that you just have such a great experience with like that. And so, you and I, we got to connect already and have a conversation and get to know each other. And here we are now back to do the podcast interview. And man, I've been really, really looking forward to this. And so we'll just dig right in and we'll just start with a nice, simple question to get us going. And then we'll dive deeper from there. But we'll start with Kerri. What do you do and who do you serve?
Yeah, so I am primarily focused on businesses who have never built their HR foundation. I've got a consulting and advisory firm focused on human resources, and it's called saltandlightadvisors.com. It's the website if you want to look it up, but I focus on not a particular size, not a particular industry. I'm really focused on businesses who never took the time to build out that solid HR foundation.
Okay. How did you even happen to get into doing this kind? I mean, what is your backstory, Kerri?
Yeah. So I worked in corporate human resources for around 20 years
Okay.
and I was in distribution, then finance, higher education, insurance, and then I got into mergers and acquisitions. And when I was in insurance and then M&A, I saw so many small to mid-sized firms that needed HR help and support. And they would come to us asking for that, especially in the employee benefit space. And I never had a really great company or person to refer them to.
Okay.
And it's not that there aren't firms out there because there are a ton, but a lot of them are larger, bigger named firms. And when
Uh-huh.
you're talking about small to mid-sized businesses, they're nervous. If they don't have any HR foundation, they're nervous to go to a big place. They're nervous about what it would cost. They're nervous about the time that it would take because they don't have an HR person in place. So this is someone in their office is going to have to, take this responsibility on, and it's usually a big undertaking. And so um, I started thinking about it for about 6 or 7 years, like, gosh, I wish there was a company I could do that. I've been in HR for over 20 years
Mhm.
and never really saw myself going out and doing it. And I pitched it to one business just as an idea. And within 24 hours, they said, yes, actually, we would like to do that with you. And so I propped up an LLC and got things going.
Wow. Wow. I mean, and isn't that the best way? Just by, just like let's verify that we have something here and we're that what we're thinking is in alignment with somebody else's thing that we can be valuable to them, that we can be of service to them. And just presenting what you were thinking about is like, wow, yeah, that would really be beneficial for us.
Mhm.
And so what inspires you most about the work that you do and the impact that you get to make, Kerri?
I mean, there's a lot of different levels to it. One
Okay.
is I was a COO, so I was on the executive side of things, and I would run across small to mid-sized businesses that would be like, "Oh, we need a U, but we can't afford it, or we can't, we're not there yet."
Okay.
And I would hear that often, and I would think the same thing, like, gosh, they would really benefit if they could have somebody with my skill set. And I understand they don't have the money to allocate toward it. And so being able to bring my skill set on a fractional or part-time or project-based level to them to where
Mhm.
they can advance their business, they can grow, they can scale, they can sleep better at night because they can take the HR worries, or they know that there are things that they aren't doing or things they don't understand, but that's not their area of expertise, and I'm
Okay.
able to come in and partner with them on that. It is extremely fulfilling.
Yeah. So let's break this down a little bit and like, like give people some ideas of like, the kind of help you've given. So what are some, and you don't have to name names or anything like that, but what are some examples of results that you have helped clients get that you're just incredibly proud of?
Yeah, brings a smile to my face because there's a lot of them. So I usually start out an engagement by doing a comprehensive HR audit, and that's about a month-long project. And I get in and I take a look at every foundational HR piece, whether it's hiring or onboarding, performance management, HR payroll technology, disciplinary actions, compensation benefits. I'm looking at comprehensively what human resources as a function is and seeing what they have in the lines of policies and HR law and all of that. And I do a gap analysis and let them know, okay, for an organization of your size, in your industry, in your state, here's what you have.
Mhm.
And here's what I think you should have to be able to operate maybe at a more successful or more sustainable level. And
Okay.
then from there, I'm able to, with confidence, say, these things you can do internally and you should. And then here are the ways that I can impact your business doing them externally. And some of my favorite projects are I do a lot of compensation data studies, and the result that comes out of that, and I'll kind of walk you through what it looks like. I
Yeah.
take a list of all of their employees, when they started with them, what they're making, when their last pay increase was, and their job title. And then I benchmark it
Okay.
25th, I do 10th, 25th, mean, 75th, and 90th percentile. And then from that, I'm able to see, okay, high overpay, high underpay. Maybe we don't have the right job title. Looks like we might have some exempt, non-exempt misclassification. So some legal issues going on out there. And then in general, here's what your current pay philosophy is, either by default or by design. Like you're
Okay.
paying in general at the 25th percentile. Why is that? Do you have comprehensive benefits? Are you meaning to pay below market? What does this look
Mhm.
like?
Mhm.
And the knowledge and the confidence that I see that give an employer when it's time for, I do financial modeling for upcoming reviews and I help them level set if there's any inequities. They feel like they're able to speak with some thought, some knowledge, some confidence on the topic. So if someone comes to them and says, I want to leave because I'm going to get more pay elsewhere, they're able to say, well, gosh, it looks like we pay you at the 75th percentile. What about flexibility? Is there something else that we can offer you because we're paying you on market right now?
Mhm.
Or, well, would you like some additional responsibilities? Because in your current role, it looks like we're paying you adequately. Or maybe they aren't, and it's time for them to bump things up. So they're able to have that knowledge and that strength behind it and making data-driven decisions instead of emotional, fear-based decisions around compensation is huge. And it's usually the largest line item on the P&L. And
Uh-huh.
so why not have some actual thought that goes into it? It's kind of mind-blowing to me, and I'm not putting down employers, but most of them are kind of guessing based off of what they see on Indeed or maybe job postings or Google, what they should pay people when it would behoove them to have some actual strategic data out there.
So I'm a complete outsider looking in here, and like so I know nothing, and I'm going to try to ask intelligent questions anyways. And but you brought up Indeed. So what might somebody like a company see from Indeed that might have them going down the wrong path or the wrong track, or just have even the wrong thought process when it comes to how they treat and manage their employees and team members?
Yeah, they might see another job posting out there in their general geographic area that's
Okay.
paying, let's say, $25 an hour for a role. And they say, oh, well, then we're competitive because we're paying that. But what they might not know is that company offers work from home or remote options, or that company might have paid maternity leave or all kinds of an amazing benefits package. And so
Okay.
there's so much more that goes into a compensation strategy. And if we see what an hourly rate is of a competitor, that's not really giving us like the full picture.
Yeah.
And that's not a compensation strategy to look to see what a competitor is doing and then just try to be within the range. Like, who do we want to be as an employer? Do we want to be competitive in a different way? Do we want to be more comprehensive in our benefits? Do we want to be known for flexibility? What do we want to be known for? What aligns with our culture? And not just like, they pay that, so we're within the range.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Just last week, I was talking with a gentleman who they've set their company up on what's called is it's an is it ESOP, I think, ESOP, where all the employees, and there's hundreds of them, they're all owners in the
Yep.
company and stuff. And
Mhm.
so that has definitely changed the dynamic and the culture in that company, and like all kinds of stuff have changed. And candidly, I ain't gonna lie, I've never even heard of ESOPs before. And so, but I was just fascinated by the conversation, like, and even with what you're bringing up here, like, yeah, you never know what's going on inside that company, and like you said, so just looking at outside of like, oh, they're paying this much. Well, that doesn't tell anywhere near the whole story and stuff. So
Yeah.
go ahead. I don't want to cut you off here.
There's ESOPs, there's PEOs, which is a co-employer. There are a ton of setups out there. There's some employers that rely heavily on W-2 workforce. There's some employers that rely heavily on contract workforces. I mean, there's just so many options out there.
Yeah.
And I think, you get into business because you're a really good attorney or a really good contractor or a really good dermatologist or whatever it is. It's not necessarily because you have a really solid business foundation. And if you
Hmm.
don't bring a partner in or hire someone that knows that piece, you're just kind of flying blind. And a lot of business owners do really great. They get a really long ways down the road financially by doing it that way. It's just harder.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is there other examples that you might like to share of like results that you've helped clients get?
Yeah. So one of the things that I did was an employee satisfaction and engagement survey for a law firm, and
Okay.
they felt like they were a really good employer, but their employees didn't seem really excited about working there, is kind of what the CEO was getting the sense. And he didn't really know what the problem was. And he was really kind of frustrated because he was like, we give a lot of benefits, we're flexible. Like, I don't know, we just don't have a lot of energy in our workforce, and I don't know why. And so I was like, you know what, let's survey instead of us guessing and taking, I can take a look at your benefits and your comp and say, well, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. Why don't we just ask your employee population? And so I can put together a survey. So I put that together, went back and forth with the ownership team, made sure that I was, touching on all of the aspects that they wanted me to. We surveyed the employee population, and we saw some really interesting things. We saw that there was low trust amongst employees to leadership, and it lit these guys on fire. They were so frustrated, like, we're so trustworthy and we're so honest with our employees. And so I started asking them some questions. How often do you communicate changes going on or goals in the organization, or if you all are succeeding, if you're trying to grow, what the future looks like, the why behind any of this? How often do you communicate that? And if you all make changes, do you just tell certain people, or how do you communicate down to, like a paralegal or an assistant? What does that look like? And at first they were like, we're really good at communicating, we'll tell anybody anything that they ask us. And I believed them, but it just wasn't translating to the employee population, I could tell. So we did some really simple things. One is they didn't have job descriptions, and
Okay.
that's one of the easiest ways to set expectations, is have clear job descriptions that will help with your job postings for hiring in the future. But putting that job description in place and then helping them see, we created career ladders so they could see where growth opportunities were and what the exact gaps were in between, like a paralegal one, two, three, so that way they understood, well, here's how you get promoted, here's how you make more money. And then we put together a monthly communication, started drafting emails from the CEO, put together quarterly events where we'd get together and talk about business outcomes. And 12 months later, we increased by 18% on that satisfaction survey. And we
Wow.
didn't do anything astronomical, and we didn't give big pay raises. It wasn't anything like I think they were expecting they were going to have to do. It was literally just clear communication and clear expectations.
Yeah. Well, and I can totally see that because when they're talking about the whole trust thing, that doesn't have anything to do with pay or anything like that. That's a whole different conversation right there.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think they took it as that they weren't ethical guys, and they are very
Yeah.
ethical. They're attorneys even, like, so it rubbed them the wrong way at first, but when we dug into it to learn what the problems are, they were very fixable, and we were able to reconcile it.
Yeah. And it's amazing that, a lot of times that lack of trust does come down to lack of effective communication and stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, wow. Yeah. And that is fascinating because I know, just when I know I'm like hosting this podcast, for example, I'm this naturally curious guy who just loves asking questions of entrepreneurs. It's like I was made to be a podcast host, I think, And but I can't tell you how many times that just people have just said afterwards, Kevin, you know what? Man, I just feel so seen and heard when I'm around you. And it's because of that whole experience of just like asking questions, and then you ask more questions, not because I'm waiting for my turn to talk, but because I just genuinely want to know. And it does, it gives people just this feeling, this it gives them this gift of feeling seen, heard, and understood. And that's exactly what you're talking about, right? And man, that is just so powerful right there.
It
And
is,
so,
and it's a lot more, I guess I would say, simple
yeah.
than what a lot of people think. Most people come to me and say the hardest part about their business is managing the people. And
Hmm.
usually I let them know that tells me immediately they have some process problems.
Okay.
Like if they
Okay.
don't have clear processes, then the people are going to have a hard time inside of their organization. Therefore, they're going to be hard to manage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those are pretty easy to clear up. It's not the people aspect. I mean, yes, we all show up with our different personalities and our different baggage and all, all of that stuff. But if we've got clarity of expectation and then clear accountability,
Yeah.
then it gets a lot easier to manage inside.
Yeah. 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 Well, okay, so now that we've got some context set here and people and listeners have an idea about who you are and what you're all about, Kerri, I want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to start talking about the relationship side of this. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons who completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships.
Yeah, it's huge. Relationships are everything.
Yeah.
When you ask that question, one of the memories that flashes back to my mind first is I was working in healthcare and I was working in the admissions side of things when I was in my undergrad degree. And when I was graduating, I was thinking about, what I'd like to do. I had gotten a business degree and, was kind of navigating what I would like to do next. And I was seeing decisions being made in this healthcare center that I was like, who is making these decisions, whether positive or negative? I'd like to know, who's making these decisions around the employee population. And I learned about HR. I'd never heard of HR really at that point. And so I was like, in my all my wisdom as a 20 something year old, I was like, well, then I want to work in HR, if that's where the decisions are being made. And, in my mid 40s now, I see the ignorance of that. But at the time, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to work in HR so I can help impact the business decisions. So I went to the HR department and I said, do you have any openings? I'd like to apply. And they said, we don't take anyone without any experience. And so immediately I started applying for jobs outside of this hospital because I thought I'll go get some experience and then I'll come back. Well, I never came back to healthcare because private sector business turns out is a lot more profitable in a lot of ways. So my path changed, but I applied for a lot of different HR roles, and a lot of people were looking for seasoned professionals. And
Okay.
I found a distribution company that I had never heard of, and they took a chance on me through the interview process. I felt like I was so unimpressive because every HR question I was trying really hard to draw, experience from what I was doing as a registrar in a hospital to how I could do well in HR. And I just felt like I was, really grabbing for straws, and they
Okay.
took a chance on me, and I've been in HR ever since. And
Wow.
if that wouldn't have happened, if somebody wouldn't have said, let's give her a shot,
Yeah.
then I don't know what my path would have looked like.
Wow. Wow. So that first, so then what was kind of the trajectory from there? So they bet on you. They're like, okay, we're going to give you a shot here and stuff. So where did that take you from there?
I started out doing insurance billing reconciliation, which
Okay.
was so boring at the time. I was like 25 or something, and or not even 25 yet. and I was making sure that we weren't getting paid for employees that were no longer with us. And I was, reconciling the statements between the insurance carrier and our employee list and what was being deducted from payroll. And it was so boring. But my boss was like, this is a major line item on the P&L. He helped me to understand the financial portion of it, which I think HR lacks a lot of tie-in to the bottom line. They make a lot of impact on the bottom line, but
Okay.
most HR pros don't really understand how what they're doing has implications on the business financials.
Okay.
And so from the very beginning, he kind of set me up in an HR mindset that was different than I think I didn't know it was different because it was my first foray into HR. But
Mhm.
being in HR for 20 years and going to association meetings and conferences and all of that, I realized pretty quickly, oh, I'm being raised in a different way. Like I'm looking at human resources in a different way. I'm not focused on culture events and, you know, all of the more fun aspects. I
Uh-huh.
was really focused on the data. And so once I had mastered that, I got into workforce planning. I got into disciplinary actions and reliability ratings. Then I got into terminations. I ran the drug screening program. So I kind of made my way through the human resources function, got into compensation, got into negotiating benefits contracts. And after doing that for almost 5 years, the company that I was with was a very well respected organization. And I had another company who reached out and said, we're growing and we would like for you to come over here and kind of bring the HR method that you've learned at this organization
Mhm.
to us. And
Mhm.
I took that. And so I went from, an HR specialist to an HR coordinator to an HR manager. And then I took a role as an HR director at this new company. And so I was able to jump up. And from there, I spent about 6 months overseeing recruitment and contracts, and then got into learning and development and started that. This was when it's kind of dating it a little bit, but this is when e-learning did not exist at the time. And so I
Okay.
started an e-learning team, and we really got into learning and development. And same deal. I'd been doing that for about 5 years, and a higher education institution reached out and said, "This, your company you're with has a really great culture. Our culture is struggling. We'd like for you to bring what you have to this organization." And so I was able to take a much larger role, a more like AVP type role there over four universities and a healthcare system. And that really set me up then for the next step, which was chief operating officer. So it was just being faithful and really getting in and learning without thinking I was too good or above any of the roles that were handed to me, and really getting in and trying to understand them instead of just trying to get through it like you would, in college. You're just trying to pass the test. I was really trying to understand the impact of this on the business. And from that skill set and that knowledge base just grew and grew. But it was also a lot of people saying yes to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, was there anybody? I just want to make sure I don't want to keep moving on. If there was anybody else that you wanted to honor and recognize and stuff. So, was there anybody else that you wanted to honor and recognize? Or
I really think the last company that I was at was a mergers and acquisitions company, and they
okay,
would buy insurance agencies. So I was a COO for an insurance agency. We got bought. I ended up at a company that would buy insurance agencies. So they were the ones that were my first client when I said I'd like to go out on my own.
okay,
That company, I said, I could stop being W-2 for you. I could save you money in that way. You could ditch my benefits, stop contributing to my 401k, and I could charge you hourly. But I would want to take on other clients as well. And so I want you to think through, is this something that would make sense to you? They were only 3 years old, so they were kind of a startup when I had
okay,
joined. And so I was hoping that I sold it well. And since I'd been in HR, I kind of knew how to position it, of going W-2 to contractor and the cost savings and all of that. And they were the ones that within 24 hours, they called me the next day and said, yeah, we're open to this. What does it look like? And if they wouldn't have taken that chance on me, that I could carry the workload and go to a contractor and they could trust that I wouldn't, share information of theirs with another client. Like there was a lot of trust that they extended
sure,
me during that time, and I had worked hard for them, so I think it wasn't misplaced, but still I really appreciate that yes that they gave me, because they
gotcha.
took a chance on me. And that was 3.5 years ago, and my business has been flourishing ever since, but they were really helping me get it started.
Yeah, yeah. And What a powerful story that is. That because it once again it comes down to trust that they'd already had this experience with you, and the way that you laid it out, they were like, you know what, let's explore this. But excuse me, it totally does come down to trust, and that they'd already had this experience with you, and they're like, okay, we're going to extend more trust to her in order to go down this path and stuff. And and of course now I would imagine that because one client then leads to another and to another, and just continues to unfold from there and stuff. And so what is an example of a situation where you personally got to make this really substantial impact, maybe even in the moment, maybe it surprised you a little bit, but you also know that would have never been possible if not for the relationship and the experiences that you've had with these companies that just kind of put their trust in you. What's an example where like you were empowered in that way because of them, Kerri?
I had an individual reach out and ask if I could do a speaking engagement
Okay.
um, in the Boot Hill area of Missouri, so southern Missouri. And I didn't know this individual. We had kind of crossed paths in the Columbia, Missouri area. He had moved on to the Boot Hill, and I lived in the Columbia, Missouri area for about 20 years or so. And he reached out and said, "We need a speaker, and we think you would be a good speaker for this women's event."
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out my speaking fees, and they were they're a nonprofit, so they were low budget. And he said, I'll pay you what I can, but you can also sell your book and you can promote your products or whatever you want to do, but we think that you would be a good feature. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I appreciate that. So I went down and spoke, and from there, I've had 6 clients spur from that one speaking
Wow.
engagement. I just had the opportunity to get in front of a bunch of people that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to meet.
Yeah.
And I've had people tell me they still listen to my podcast from that. I've actually got a speaking engagement that I'm getting ready to do in 3 days from now of a woman who was at that event but was part of an organization, and I'm coming to speak at her organization. I kick off a new client on Monday for an HR audit. I had met him through that. So, and I've got a compensation data study coming up in October, same deal. A woman who heard me at that conference and then saw me at another conference, an HR conference, speak in that same area. So it just blossomed. And, part of it is them taking a risk on me. The other part was me showing up in the best way that I possibly could have. Even though they weren't paying me as much, I took advantage of the opportunity. I brought my A game. I was well prepared. I was very professional. And so I think that is part of the intersection that sometimes gets missed. If someone opens something up for you, you've got to give it your very best, bring your very best self to it, because you just never know what's on the other side of it. And it's been a huge boom for my business.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, congratulations on that. That is
Thank
awesome.
you.
Well, for anyone that might be listening to this and thinking to themselves, man, Kevin, I really love Kerri. I love how she shows up. I really appreciate some of the stuff that she shared. And maybe she might be able to help us. Or maybe they're thinking, I know somebody else I want to connect her with. Any website, any resources that we can share with folks?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
so you're able to find me there. And then I've got my website is saltandlightadvisors.com. If you do /contact, that those messages come directly to me personally. I don't
Okay.
have anyone else reading those. And my personal website is kerrymroberts.com. Or you can
Okay.
check out my podcast on YouTube or Spotify or Apple. It's called Don't Waste the Chaos.
Okay. And I'll make sure if you're listening, let's just scroll down. I'll make sure that we've included links there for you to make that nice and easy. Kerri, is there any last thing that you feel led to share before we call it a wrap?
One thing that I was thinking of a minute ago when we were talking is when people give you the opportunity, if you have showed up professionally and brought your very best, the more you make the ask and the more you put yourself in front of people, the more confidence you will gain in yourself.
Yeah.
And that self-trust is a big part of it as well. It's not just other people giving you the opportunity, even though it's huge. You have to have those doors open to you, and you've got to be a person worth opening the doors for.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You have
Yep.
to be there for people just as much as they're there for you. But
Yep.
also, honoring commitments to yourself. So when someone gives you that opportunity and you give your very best and you show up in the most professional way and you don't make excuses and all of those things, you build your trust with yourself, and self-trust is just as important as it is giving trust to others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Kerri, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And I'm excited to get this out there and share it with folks. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet.